This is The Week on Word, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from Word Radio. You can listen to Word Radio anytime, anywhere on wordradio.com and the Word Radio app. Give us a play and download it today. In this episode, Dr. Tim Golden, lawyer and philosophy professor, joined Wake Up with WURD with Solomon Jones to discuss the murder of Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk. And Taylor Fraser McCollum, environmental advocate, joined EcoWord magazine with VOC to examine the proposed $5 billion data center campus in Landover, Maryland. While the project promises jobs and tax revenue, it also raises serious concerns about energy use and higher utility costs for residents. But first, Trymaine Lee, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, joined Evening WURDs with Dr. James Peterson to discuss his new book, 1,000 Ways to Die: The True Cost of Violence on Black Life in America.
I'm excited, but also humbled to welcome to this program Trymaine Lee, Pulitzer Prize and Emmy Award winning journalist, MSNBC contributor, and the host of Into America, the podcast where he covers the intersection of blackness, power, and politics, a contributing author to the 1619 Project, and here to talk about one of the most incredible books I've read in a very, very, very long time, 1,000 Ways to Die: The True Cost of Violence on Black Life in America. Trymaine Lee, welcome to Evening WURDs, good brother.
My brother, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you, man. Thank you very much.
So, bro, I don't know really where to start. I mean, I do want to say congratulations on the work. It's incredible. I can't imagine everything it took for you to put these words on the page. And I want to try to give our listeners a sense. First of all, go out and get the book right now. It's called 1,000 Ways to Die. I want to try to give them a sense of the genre of it first, right? Because this is autobiographical. This is also deeply reported, and it is also deeply historical. And so as a writer, talk to us a little bit about your approach. You know, early on you say that you got to tell some stories in here about your family.
That's right. That
your family rule has been, don't tell these stories. Mm-hmm. So help our audience understand your approach to putting 1,000 Ways to Die together.
Thank you very much for all of that in this warm introduction. You know, I've been using the language that it's a braiding of memoir and history and reporting. Mm-hmm. I think about the interwoven strands of what I'm trying to do here, which does incorporate, much of my own family story. Mm-hmm. It's always been important for me, even in the earliest iterations of this book, to hold the reader's hand and walk you through a story about America. Mm-hmm. And moving through from the very beginning, the Black experience and how Black life was shaped by gun violence in this country. Mm-hmm. Moving through time, but also geography from the South and slavery up through the North and the migration. But it was also important for me to give the historical context. I want this book to sit next to other books that speak to how we've lived and died in this country. It should sit next to 1619 and the color, all of the Color of Law, all the important books to understand how we've existed here and the forces that have shaped us. But I think that the personal part, it became much more personal than I intended it to be. In the beginning, I was still a little arm's length. I wanted to be the sober-minded, friendly neighborhood reporter who you've seen doing all kinds of things over the years. But then my life had shifted rather dramatically and forced me to be vulnerable and honest in a way that I never expected.
Bro, you had a heart attack.
I almost died. Yeah. And that was, it forced me to go from engaging with, the work that I was trying to do in terms of this is violence and this is, the violence of the systems, to really expand the aperture on what violence is. There is the violence of, the bullet and the trigger. And there is the systemic violence that comes long before a bullet is ever fired. But there's also the violence, oftentimes the silent violence that we carry within us, the trauma that we're forced to engage with. And also as Black people, certainly as Black men, no doubt, but also as a Black journalist who for most of my career was on the front lines of this. And it was also my intention and mission in some ways to tell these stories from that vantage point. But I had to get real and reckon with, what that was doing to me and how I was, physically beginning to manifest that violence.
Yeah. So I don't really understand how to articulate this for our audience. So I'm just going to try here. I mean, you talk about braiding here. You're doing braiding at different levels, right? And so you have covered some of the most tragic moments in the collective of Black America and in specific families of Black America and in your family here in Black of America. And you thread these things together. When you think about that kind of work, and I'll be honest with you, one of the things that's amazing to me about this book is how much of myself I see in it. Right? It's hard to, when you cover these stories over time, you do sometimes think about, man, what kind of toll is this taking on me?
That's right.
Right. But the toll on you was both psychic and it was also physical, ultimately. And you're having a heart attack and you're like, well, let me just go take my family and talk about the mentality a little bit that you discovered in the writing of the book.
Yeah. That's a great question, man. I mean, first of all, I had this heart attack without much of any warning signs at all. And when it happened, it was the most, I wish there was a better word than surreal. I don't have a vocabulary big enough to find a word that's more appropriate. But the idea of my world spinning and my body, it wasn't that it was failing or even separating. It was just all of the nausea, head spinning, drenched in sweat, feeling weak. Then I also have what feels like an elephant stepping on my chest. I don't think I understood how fragile a position I was in at that very moment. But after the heart attack initially passes, the medical folks, the emergency folks came. And by that point, I wasn't showing any obvious signs that I had a heart attack. They checked my vitals, which was my pulse and everything, my heart rate. They said, do you want to go to the hospital? You seem all right. And I was thinking to myself, as a husband, and my wife has a work trip the next day. And as a father, my then 5, about to turn 6-year-old daughter has camp the next day. I didn't want everybody in the hospital all night. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to tough it out until the morning. Until everybody's cool. And then I will go and then I'll deal with myself. Make sure my wife is good. Make sure my daughter is good. And then I'm going to check on it. What I learned later, is that most of the people who die from a heart attack die within that first hour. Right? I was able to survive, and I'll save the long story. But I think coming out of that, I had to really, really digest that what I had been covering had been stuck to me in places. And I did what so many of us do, which is ignore the hard things. And you know what we do when I was younger and single? We're chasing women. We're drinking. And then also we're pouring ourselves even further into the work, right? Even further into the work. And none of those things do a good job of actually processing the stress and trauma. And so I had to get my feet back under me. I stopped writing the book because I had been writing the book for 2 years up to that point. And it was a different book. And then this happens. I stepped away to get my mind right and get my body right. Learn some techniques, mindfulness and breathing and really for the first time ever, feeling a kind of freedom in that I would go to work and guess what I'm doing at 1:30 if nothing's happened. I'm going to the gym. I ain't even asking anybody.
Right.
Before it was kind of like, you got to be, I'm not worried. I'm honestly not worried about nobody. I really am not. I'm just so grateful to be here. I ain't worried about nobody. So I'm focusing on my health first. I do all that work. And then when I returned to the book became what it was supposed to be. Right. And I talk about this a little bit in the book. A lot of it in the beginning. A blood clot and a bullet are very different things, but both have the power to shred a life. And both come from these American impulses that we experience, right? What are we carrying? What is the violence of holding the idea that people you love and care about or neighbors or friends have been taken violently too soon? What does it mean when you know that this school was underfunded and we're all just scrapping it together, right? What does it mean when there's actual hunger, right, in our communities and to find a way to get some bread, right? What does it mean to do all those things? What does it mean as a Black scribe to continually go into those spaces, to shine that light in these very dark places and emerge seemingly unscathed and still have to navigate the white newsroom and the white gaze and how we're grappling with all of that. And so, yeah, it definitely reoriented me, but I think it became what it was supposed to be all along.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely did. There's no question about that. I don't want to step on our conversation coming up here in about an hour, but I want to jump ahead a little bit to Red Cotton, because your capacity to paint vivid 3-4-dimensional portraits of the people that you engage is really powerful. But some of those people are close personal friends of yours who are imbricated in this larger narrative of gun violence and structural racism violence in America. And Deborah's story is it's such an extraordinary story. One, and folks, there are going to be spoilers here, and there are going to be some spoilers later on tonight too, but it's an extraordinary story because it's someone who, it's a Rodney King type of story. Survive, but not. Right? Survive, but not. Right? And, you know, your interface with her, and I think my interpretation of what you learned from her was really, really powerful. So again, I'm not trying to make you too emotional either, brother, but share a little bit about your experience with Deborah, because the way first of all, the writing is magnetic, bro. The writing is beautiful.
Thank you.
But it gets brighter when you're writing about Deborah, because that's how you feel and felt about her. Let's talk a little bit about that story.
You talk about not wanting me to get me too emotional, brother. I've had tears sitting under, like right behind my eyes for like a month and a half.
Of course.
Every time I talk about these stories. So no worry about that. Okay. This is the space we're existing in, to tell this story. I met Deborah, this ball of light and love and energy in my earliest days in New Orleans. And we became fast friends. And, you know, she was a fan of New Orleans. She loved life in New Orleans. She loved the way I was telling the stories of New Orleans, even the tougher ones. I was a police reporter. And there was a story, you know, a tragic killing that I wrote about. Yeah, that she couldn't let go. A little girl who was killed in the most tragic ways. Giggle Box.
The Giggle Box chapter.
After she was killed, her teachers at her school said that she was just a smiley, giggling girl. And the one thing that I think couldn't escape Deborah and didn't escape me was that when a police source told me that she must have been looking up at her killer when he killed her because of where the bullet was. And then you put that next to this smiley, giggly little girl. And that's what Deborah, time and again, we had lost contact for a while after the storm. We weren't in constant contact. And she would email me asking about the case. And finally she, gave me word that the suspect in the case had been killed herself. But in my reporting of that story, just weeks before Katrina, and one of the neighbors talks about a great flood. And then weeks later it comes, and that girl's life signaling that and death signaling that. But Deborah will go on to become a reporter herself and covering the second line culture and the bands and this culture and lifestyle in the city. And in 2019, she ended up covering a second line parade that ended up being the scene for the largest mass shooting the city had seen, I believe, ever, where 20 plus people were wounded, and she was the most gravely injured among them. And when we talk about what the idea of survival actually is, and as journalists, whether you're talking about shootings or car accidents, sometimes we'll say, you know, 1 dead, 2 with non-life, threatening injuries.
The objective distance of reporting.
And also what that actually means.
Right.
What survive you're not going to die today from this. And so Deborah was badly wounded. And so once I came back to the book, one of my first stops was New Orleans to go talk to her because she embodied the pure joy that you experience from having feet in New Orleans and smelling the smells and surrendering yourself to it.
Almost the antidote to you, because you were covering Katrina and everything before that, right?
Right.
So that's the antidote in some ways to that.
Right. And so I had this great night with her, and she told me about her struggles and how what the bullets did to her and how she actually forgave the young man who was involved in the shooting because she pointed to the violence that marked and dotted his life before that.
She acknowledged that they were caught in the cycle of retribution.
She understood that, and there's no way that she could hold him guilty without holding the system and society guilty. And then she died 4 months or so after our interview. And that's why it matters.
Yeah.
That's why it matters. And I think her story also carries with it the complexity of survival, the long ripples of gun violence. And I think the reason why, again, all of this matters is because of the joy we hold, because of the possibility, because of the imagination, the courage to be joyful and happy despite what we are up against every single day, right? What's aimed at us. And then to lose her like that, after she had initially survived that shooting, man, that's
devastating.
That is devastating. That is devastating.
She was able to see in you that the brutal murder of the girl known as Gigglebox changed you, even before you could see that it changed you. Talk about what that change means now.
Yeah, I think I was doing what I thought I needed to be done in two ways. I thought that to do my job effectively, I need to keep on going. And also to be an amplifier for the community's voices, I need to keep going and I need to keep telling sometimes these terrible stories. But it was, as some experts describe as weathering. I was being weathered by this and existing as a black man and the pressures of trying to make it professionally. But it did shift, my attitude a little bit. And then, then it was Katrina also. And I'm not the type of person that, my disposition changes very much. I mean, very much, even if I'm having a bad day, but I was a little tighter and I was a little snappier and I was a certain kind of way. But she was referring to, now as we talk about energy all the time, I think she could feel that what this job was doing to me. And I remember these, which sounds insane to me now, that as a young police reporter, I'd be at a crime scene for hours waiting for them to pull the body out. I got to talk to everybody. I would arrive at the crime scene before the detectives get there, because I got the police scanner over my shoulder. So I'm there. He looks just like me and a piece of him missing. I could see it. And then you have to go talk to the cops. Then you have to go get the yearbook picture. And then it's like, then you have to write it by 6 o'clock. Cause back then we still had the newspaper press. They had to like print the story on paper. And I sound crazy, y'all. Some of y'all younger, this sounds insane. They used to have to print these jaws on paper.
That's right.
But we kept going. But that's no natural way to do it without any real tools to process it, which we all need. As a reporter, as a journalist who cares about these issues and cares about his people, I've found myself on those front lines. But people experiencing this in communities on those front lines also need tools to process it, because this stuff isn't benign, right? It doesn't just sit in that silo. It manifests in our sleep, which is my big issue. I didn't sleep well. I was taking over-the-counter medicine to sleep. I was doing all kinds of stuff to try to sleep. So even though it wasn't shifting me during the way I moved and engaged with people, I couldn't sleep. And then when you can't sleep, cardiovascular issues, right? And the fact that black people get hours less sleep than white folks.
This is one of the reasons why we die quicker.
Exactly. Because we're supposed to be using that sleep time to restore and energize. So hopefully out of this though, and I think, the energy and emotion, of what Deborah Cotton represents in us, to shift our gaze from who we think is the violent one, which that does not mean not to hold people accountable. That's right. We need more of that. We need more conflict resolution. And we need young men especially to feel solid in themselves.
And you examine that with Cecil Wright and your grandfather. That's examined in the book as well. Yes.
But there's also the greater violence, the disservice that we do when we point to that young man who ended up, that teenager with a gun in his hand, who's hungry, from a community where all of that, and not hold all of these components and cogs of the system that delivered the weapon, created the angst, cloistered everybody up in these segregated ghettos, put red lines around it, snatched any opportunity could, snatch economic resources, right? The economic dislocation of a people, right? At every turn. That's violence. That's violence. So hopefully people understand the systemic nature of this.
We only got about a minute left, brother, but I want to, there's a couple of news stories over the last couple of days that in reading your book and these things happening, I want to hear your voice on it. So as you know, Charlie Kirk was assassinated, yesterday, at Utah Valley College. And I would love to hear your thoughts about that. It's such a complicated situation when he was assassinated yesterday. And then today, we hear about these threats directed at HBCUs. Now, there's nothing that the FBI or anyone has said that connects that assassination to anyone black, much less anyone at an HBCU. But there's something very American about those two stories, and something that I think your book really captures about the interface between any kind of gun violence at all and the black community. What's been going through your mind?
Yeah.
We got 9/11 today. You got the Charlie Kirk assassination and threats directed at HBCUs.
These moments are complicated and fraught during our best days, and days like this even more so. But America excretes violence from its pores, And it is not the violence is not the dominion of Black America, right? It's the dominion of America. And we die in very routine ways as a public spectacle. But lest we forget, we can all be touched by violence, and we saw that happen. There is something to be said about the political space that we've existed in for as long as we can remember, but being churned up, the divisiveness, the hate, the fear mongering, the misogyny, the racism that isn't the domain of Charlie Kirk's alone, right? It's not his alone. So dare I say that he was stirring. I'm not saying, what I'm saying is, this is America's baseline, right? And we're so bound and coiled up with the hate that those cords are going to pop and they lash. And it lashed Charlie Kirk, who said himself that gun deaths are the cost of liberty. I'm not saying anything.
Charlie Kirk said that gun deaths are the cost of the Second Amendment, the cost of freedom in the United States.
Some of us would argue the costs are too steep.
I would be one of those people.
I am one of those people. I think Charlie Kirk should not be dead right now, right? He shouldn't have paid the cost. None of us should be paying this cost time and again. But as he said, and there's a lot of people who believe that some deaths are okay because it's the cost. And especially when we bear the weight of those deaths, then it's one conversation.
A disproportionate share of those deaths.
And that's one conversation, right? That's why it's okay. That's why it's a cost they think they're willing to pay because it's us. But lest we forget those babies, right? And Sandy Hook. Lest we forget, again, moments like this of political violence, we're all paying this cost. And I'd argue, this book is not prescriptive. I'm speaking to the dynamics and the way it's shaped America and shaped Black America in particular. But I would argue the costs are way too steep for us to continue to pay.
Trymaine Lee, the book is called 1,000 Ways to Die, The True Cost of Violence on Black Life in America. It is extraordinary. Everyone needs to go out and get it. It will be one of the things we'll be talking about for a long time. Thank you for sitting down with us here at Evening WURDs. Brother, can't wait to talk with you here at the Free Library of Philadelphia.
You're listening to The Week on Word.
Hi, this is Dr. James Peterson, the host of Evening WURDs. Tune in to Evening WURDs Monday through Thursday from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. for critical analysis of news, culture, and arts that resonate with our community. You won't want to miss our weekly segments of critical commentary with Cousin Chris, guests from the Center for American Progress, and dialogue with our local council members. Plus, other specialty segments full of education, entertainment, and engagement. Listen to Evening WURDs Monday through Thursday from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. only on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media.
This is The Week on Word, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on Word Radio. Make sure you look for and follow WURD Radio on social media. Up next, Dr. Tim Golden, lawyer and philosophy professor, joined Wake Up With WURD with Solomon Jones.
Joining us now is lawyer and philosophy professor, Dr. Tim Golden. He is, of course, a professor of philosophy at Whitman College for 20 years. He was a criminal defense lawyer here in Philadelphia and in the federal courts. Tim, good morning.
Good morning, Solomon. Thanks for having me on this morning. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for making the time. So we got to talk about Charlie Kirk and what happened with him. He, of course, was shot yesterday, and want to talk about the atmosphere that's kind of led us to this moment and where we go from here. Who was Charlie Kirk?
Charlie Kirk was a young conservative activist who is credited with helping President Trump win the 2024 election because of his extreme influence with young people in the United States of America. He founded the conservative political action group Turning Point USA. And at the age of 31, very tragically yesterday, he was assassinated. He was killed. And what happened yesterday is, I think, a very sad tale in a very sad commentary on where we are as a society. Charlie Kirk was more than just a conservative activist. He was a conservative provocateur. He made a name for himself through saying some things that were often offensive to people of color, to people in marginalized communities. He came off as someone with very little compassion. He was an extreme loyalist to Donald Trump. He was a trusted advisor to Donald Trump, who, it is said, often pushed back on Trump for some of his policies and so forth. So he was a loud voice in American democracy, who was actually yesterday, when he was tragically killed, was on a tour, and the tour was titled "Prove Me Wrong." And he was touring. I think he had 12 or 13 more stops on his tour. Yesterday was the first one where he was going to college campuses. He himself, I understand, dropped out of college, and he became a voice for conservative attacks on the kinds of things that Donald Trump has been doing with higher education, for example, President Trump's immigration policy, and that sort of thing. So that's who he was. And I think the question for all of us today, as we reflect on 9/11 and the violence that was brought upon us from outside of the country by people who sort of infiltrated the country and turned American transportation against us by flying planes into buildings, I think we have to take a hard look today in the wake of the Charlie Kirk tragedy. And let's be clear, Solomon, it is a tragedy, right? We should never wish death on anyone, right? No matter what they say, no matter what their rhetoric is, no matter how offensive it may be, we have to be better than using violence to settle our political disputes, right? So what happened to him is inexcusable. But even as we reflect on 9/11 and the violence that came to us from without, today we have to reflect on the violence that seems to be tearing this country apart from within, right? I mean, the idea that we would use violence to silence someone because we disagree with that person is something that we have to figure out how to expunge from our political engagements with one another, because if we don't, it's only going to get worse. And sadly, and my heart goes out to his family, right? He was married, he has young children, and it's very sad that now his family has to deal with this. And we have to, but what makes it worse, Solomon, is, and I just want to make this one last point, you now have conservative activists like Steve Bannon and others who are referring to Charlie Kirk as a casualty of war. And they're doubling down on this, and they're using this to further foment more political violence. And that has to stop. And if we're going to stop it, we have to look at the kind of violence that occurred on January 6th, 2021, for example. That climate and the pardoning of those people who actually killed police officers, that sets the stage. I mean, think about it. we are all condemning what happened to Charlie Kirk by saying we shouldn't use violence against people because we disagree with them. Mm-hmm. And the president that currently occupies the White House couldn't accept the fact that he lost an election and essentially manipulated people to go to D.C. and act out political violence on people because they thought that the election was stolen, mistakenly thought that the election was stolen. And then he pardoned those people.
Yes.
So when we talk about the climate that leads to the tragic death of Charlie Kirk, I think we have to begin at the top. And this is not an attempt to politicize this issue. It's an honest assessment of where we are as a country and how we got there.
You know, one of the interesting things to me is when you look at incidents like this, you wonder who benefits from this. You wonder who could take this and really use it as capital, you know, for their career or for their politics or for their beliefs or what have you. One of the things that the president said in the wake of this is that Charlie Kirk is, quote, a martyr for truth and freedom. He said that his voice and his views will be louder and grander than ever, and it's not even close. And so to watch this happen and not knowing the reason that it happened because they haven't caught the person who did it, you know, you just wonder what happens from here and who capitalizes on what happened with Charlie Kirk. I mean, what are your thoughts, man? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so I think sadly from here it only worsens, Solomon, and it worsens because you have people like the president and you have other conservative voices who are essentially looking at Charlie Kirk as a martyr, and they are using this to fuel more political violence. And violence is certainly the kind of violence that leads to someone's death is contemptible, and it has to be condemned. And I condemn in no uncertain terms what happened to Charlie Kirk yesterday. That's just unacceptable. We can't accept that that can never be an acceptable response to political disagreement, right? It's just unacceptable. So with that said, violence isn't just physical. We have to learn to examine how our words are violent, how our rhetoric locks people into stereotypes, and then how social media furthers the violence by putting people in silos and algorithms measuring who agrees with you and what you watch and what you feed yourself on social media. We don't get our news from legitimate news sources anymore. We get it from videos, and you add to that the influence of artificial intelligence. And I understand the shooter is not in custody, but I wonder if and when the shooter is apprehended, who killed Charlie Kirk yesterday, what kind of a silo did they live in?
Yeah. Right?
Were they influenced by things that he may have said that may have been pieced together or put on a loop and then made to think that killing him was the right thing to do? I mean, we have to begin to examine the role of technology and social media and artificial intelligence in helping to exacerbate the climates that are created by people whose rhetoric, again, may be something that we disagree with, but certainly is not worthy of their life being ended, right? And so I just think it only worsens from here because a lot of conservative voices are now doubling down on the martyr narrative, and President Trump certainly is doubling down on the martyr narrative, and it's just going to make people feel more on edge, more defensive, more aggravated, paradigm when it comes to technology. And I don't think there's any turning back. My only hope is that we find ways to build real connection with one another and real community with one another. And we understand that regardless of our ideas, every human life is valuable, and we can get further in this world through actual disagreement with words and argument than we can with political violence against one another that leads to death.
Yeah. We're talking, of course, with lawyer and philosophy professor Dr. Tim Golden about the shooting death of Charlie Kirk, which, of course, happened yesterday. The other thing this does, other than exacerbate, I think, the divisions between people, it also changes the headlines, Tim. It changes the headlines and changes the subject. One of the things, of course, that has been in the headlines in recent days is the Epstein files and a letter that came out purportedly from Donald Trump. We don't know whether it was or not. He says it's not. The signature appears to say otherwise, but it changes the subject, Tim. And so, what should the subject be right now in the minute that we have left, in your view?
You know what I would love to see, Solomon? We live in a world right now that's tragically governed by just two of our three branches of government. The president is governing by executive order, and the Supreme Court on their emergency docket is essentially allowing those executive orders to take shape and upend the status quo. Congress is doing nothing. You know what the subject should be? The subject, I would love to see a headline that says, Congress passes bipartisan immigration bill with enough votes to overcome Trump's veto. Because if that happens, that would bring an end to the dog and pony show of National Guard and ICE agents and all of that, because now we would have actually a public policy. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about an end to qualified immunity. We should be talking about the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Those are the things we should be talking about. And it's sad to live in a country in which only 2/3 of the government is functional and Congress does nothing on public policy because they're so afraid of going against the president of the United States that they just do nothing and capitulate to his agenda, which is tearing this country apart.
This is the Week on Word.
Good morning. It's Solomon Jones, host of the hottest morning show on radio, Wake Up With WURD. Listen weekdays from 7 to 10 a.m. for laughter, for fun, for politics, for family, for more than you can imagine. Check it out every day, Monday through Friday. Wake Up With WURD on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURD.
You're listening to the Week on Word podcast. To learn more about our programming, visit WURDradio.com. Our last conversation for this episode features Taylor Frazier McCollum, environmental advocate, who joined EcoWord magazine with POC.
But we got to get back to our jam-packed show, and I'm extremely excited to have her on the show today. She's doing some amazing work as an advocate, an environmental advocate in the DMV area. We got Taylor Frazier McCollum on the line with us right now. Again, she's an environmental advocate, and we're going to be talking about these data centers. And it's a huge, one of the biggest, the largest on the East Coast, coming to Landover, Maryland, which is actually in Prince George's County, which is one of the most highest paid African-American counties in the United States. So the fact that something like this is coming to a rich Black county in the United States, which is the largest, it's going to be one of the largest data centers, again, and that's in Landover, Maryland. And it's actually called the name of it is going to be called Bright Seed Associates. It's going to be called, they're naming it the Bright Seed Associates LLC, and they're an affiliate from the Leonard Associates and also Tower Consortium. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I get that right. So, and this is going to be something that is going to take place and break ground between 2026 and 2027. So I'm definitely trying to get out in front of this as this is happening in Black cities all across the country. But I want to bring Taylor on the line. Good morning, Taylor. Welcome to WRD. Thank you again for answering when I called. Thank you for jumping on and talking and informing us here. Good morning. Please introduce yourself and let the people know who they're listening to.
All right. Good morning. As you said, I'm Taylor Frazier McCollum, and I'm a community advocate from Landover. I am working on a petition on change.org to help stop the data center from being built in Landover. I've also been recently able to meet with Shayla Adams Stafford, who's our county council representative, and she was able to give me some information. Just a moment. I'm sorry. I'm had car trouble this morning, so I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, no, you're fine. No, but I think that's really great. The fact that you were able to actually speak to someone who's in a higher position to actually get some things done, especially an elected official. And that's where, we actually want to start at so we can know why did they approve these kind of things, because this actual center was approved by the entire board in Prince George's County.
Yes, and I will say on Councilwoman Adams Stafford's behalf, she was not on the board at the time that this was voted on. Okay. So her seat became vacant, and then she was elected into that recently in June of 2025. So she's kind of just getting the information on the data center, just getting the heads up on everything. So I was very happy with the meeting that she held for the community the other day. Her responses were very great. She's actually in the process of trying to do a trade deal with Korea, and she's going to go visit that area and find out about underwater data centers that they're doing there. She has some ideas that she wants to pitch to the owners of Bright Sea Tech Park as far as what they could place instead of a data center there. So I really did like the conversation and enjoy what she had to say about how she feels about data centers and the impact that they will have on the Landover community.
Mm-hmm. And this is a $5 billion project, right? And when you think about the name of it, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do my research before I came on with you, it actually annoyed me that they even called it Bright Sea Tech Park, to be honest with you, Taylor. Like, I think that's playing in the faces of the people from Bright Sea Road, and I understand that it was very cut and clear and dry that they named it Bright Sea Tech Park because it's literally sitting on Bright Sea Road. But I think that takes away from the authenticity and the culture of what Landover truly is when you see a big billionaire who actually owns the national team as well, the Washington Nationals, the baseball team, comes through and just, tries to be a part of the culture by renaming it Bright Sea Tech Park to make it seem like, oh, we're here to be a part of the community, not take from the community. I thought that was a slap in the face.
Yes, no, I completely agree. I think that naming it the Bright Sea Tech Park is trying to pay homage in some way to the area, but it's like, why would you pay homage with something that's going to bring detriment or harm the community? And, when you do your research on data centers and their impact long term, a lot of people have been in the comment sections online saying like, well, Loudoun County has all of these data centers and they're fine. Well, we don't know that yet. They haven't been around for hundreds of years, these data centers. So we don't know what the long-term impacts are going to be. So I think that once we get people excited or involved or aware of these impacts that are present moment impacts, like rising energy costs, then they'll understand, like, let's do something about this. Let's stop it from happening in our community.
Yes. And, it says that it's supposed, and one of the things too, that I think that the reason why it passed unanimously across the board is because they talked about the tax cuts and they talked about, or the tax revenue, I should say, the tax cuts, the tax revenue, and then the promising of thousands of jobs. But in my opinion, if you don't have some type of tech, background, if you don't have some type of coding background, if you don't have some type of green job background where you know how to instill some of these energy components that need to be installed in order to get these data centers up and running, you're not going to know. If you don't have trades like electrician, plumber, HVAC, all of that, you're not going to be a part of these jobs that are being created. And if you think about the demographic around that 20706, 20704 area, the demographic doesn't have that
skill set.
Exactly. Thank you for taking the words out of my mouth. So what's your thoughts on that? Have you been talking to anyone in the neighborhood around the actual Landover site?
Yes, we've been talking to community members. We're organizing currently. The people that helped me to create the video online that you saw was a Party for Socialism and Liberation. So I'm working with them just kind of to get mobilize and get community members together. So from what I've been hearing from talking to people in Landover, they want to see something different at their site. They want to see something that's going to uplift the community. One person proposed, because we know that AI is taking over a lot of our mid-level jobs, things that people in Prince George's County rely on for income are now being replaced with automation or computers. So we want them to focus on trade education. So maybe at that site, we could have some type of like multi-trade campus that would have like electrician, plumbing, HVAC, steam fitters, cosmetology, a lot of different things that Prince George's Community College may not be offering or may offer, and just have it in a centralized location. But, just pitching different ideas, that something that could bring positivity to the community, something that can uplift the community, because we do need to see a change in the way that people are being educated for the future.
Yes, I agree. And it's been about 20 years, right? Because the actual mall itself was torn down in 2006. It's about to be 2026, right, next year. So it has been 20 years. So I agree. And there's has been, substantial amount of efforts to try to, get something going there, get somebody to buy it, keep something there as far as property. But it's kind of hard to do so, especially because you have the Redskins Stadium, which was the FedEx Stadium. It's been renamed now. I can't think of it. I'm sorry, Northwest, and I want to make sure I correct myself, the Commander Stadium, no longer the Redskins Stadium, the Commander Stadium, that has been renamed now. That was once the FedEx Stadium. And I know that commotion right there was a heated situation as far as like how to keep business in that corridor. But at the same time, I also, Taylor, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I would love to know your opinion on it too. And right after that, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. But I think that this also has something to do with the fact that the stadium is moving back to the district, right? And then now at the same time, this data center is being created as the switch is happening, right? So I think that with the two companies, the two millionaires, they kind of made a deal with each other like, hey, I'm about to start this. I know you don't necessarily want this going to be around your stadium or your arena. So let's see how we can make something work. And again, this is someone who owns the Washington Nationals, who just got a brand new stadium in Southwest Washington, D.C. himself a couple years ago.
No, I completely agree. I mean, who knows what's happening behind closed doors, because that's how a lot of deals are done, especially in politics and in business. We've seen that time and time again, especially with the approval of the data center. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a lot of mass media around it. It wasn't brought to the community's attention on a large
community
scale.
Input at all.
Exactly. So that could have definitely happened. The way that we're describing it could have went down just like that. So I think that what we need to focus on is that this data center is also going to impact DC residents, because the tributaries that feed into the Anacostia River are located in Landover, Maryland. And if the data center's wastewater is going into those small streams, it's then going to go right into the Anacostia. So it's a bigger issue, so residents of DC should be concerned about this data center, so I think that the way that things are done behind closed doors needs to be exposed. We need to understand what deals were made, because that stadium leaving was not like public information either. I feel like the council people found out about it like when they were in the media saying like, well, we didn't have a heads up, like, hey, we're going back to DC, so it was definitely something that was done kind of like without input from even them. So now I feel like the county council has created the Qualified Data Center Task Force, and they're asking for community input. So I'm hoping that we can get that community input so that it doesn't get built.
For sure. And Taylor, we got to go to a quick commercial break. And right after this quick commercial break, I got about 3 more questions with you. And then again, I appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And again, you're listening to Taylor Fraser McCullen, who is an environmental advocate and an advocate in general for people of color in the DMV area. And we're making sure that we're putting out the news and information about what's going on with this data center, one of the largest on the East Coast, that's being built in Prince George's County, Maryland, exactly in Landover, Maryland, which is right next to Glenarden, Maryland, where you have the largest population of Black people, wealthy Black people in the nation. So this is definitely a huge conversation that we want to stay on top of. But we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. Stay locked. This your girl POC. Eco Word. Yep. You already know what time it is, man. It's your girl POC. We locked and loaded. We're back live. Eco Word. Each and every Friday, starting at 10 a.m., man. It's about We got about 15 minutes left in today's show. Again, we're locked in with our special guest, talking about these data centers that's popping up all over rural America, urban America. And it so happened to be next to low income environments, low income neighborhoods. And I think that this is another way of exploiting people. And that's why I want to get ahead of these conversations as we see these data centers popping up at a rapid pace all around the country. And this one particularly is going to be one of the largest on the East Coast. And again, it's coming to Landover, Maryland, where the old Landover Mall used to be. It's going to be an entire campus, and it's called the Bright Seat Tech Park. And again, and it's owned by Bright Seat LLC. I want to make sure I get that right, because I want to make sure that you can go do your Googles yourself to look it up to see how this is going. It's called, it's owned by the actual Bright Seat Associates LLC, which is an affiliate of Leonard Enterprises and Tower Consortium. So definitely make sure you look that up. And I think that you should go ahead and do your own research, because especially if you're listening in from the DMV, because it's about to break ground in 2026, 2027. So it can actually get started. And, I want to jump Taylor back into the conversation. Again, you're listening to Taylor, who is an advocate, an environmental advocate coming out of the DMV area. Taylor Frazier McCullen coming out of the DMV area. And she's been spot on when it comes to this. You know what I mean? She's been ahead of it. She's been making sure she's advocating. She's making sure that community input and community impact is a part of these conversations. And Taylor, I want to ask you, because when you think about this data center, the first thing I thought about was Maple Ridge Apartments. The first thing I thought about was the Glenarden Apartments that they just literally built about 2 years ago for our senior citizens right on Bright Seat Road. That's like walking distance across the street. The bus stop that those senior citizens use is on the same side of the street as the data center, right? So talk to me a little bit about that. When you think about Maple Ridge Apartments and you think about the senior citizens homes that are legitimately across the street.
I think, excuse me, I think that it's unfortunate that they're putting it in such a close proximity, especially when you already have seen how it's impacting other communities in Georgia and in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Again, we're going to not highlight the ones that are supposedly operating on a great standard in Virginia, but we have 44 data centers currently open in the state of Maryland. So again, those are operating in a different standard. This is not going to be a hyperscale data center. These are small office building spaces, maybe one or two server setups, not huge spaces like this one that they're proposing. Mm-hmm. So I think that the proposal should be reevaluated, and that we should move it somewhere else, or, get it placed in an area where there's a less densely populated amount of people. Because it's going to have a hum to it. As I said, it's going to create light pollution. The woman that spoke about it on A More Perfect Union, if you have followed them on YouTube, you can find the video that they did on the Georgia Data Center from Facebook. It's, I don't remember what exact city or county it's in Georgia, but she said that she can't even go to sleep at night because the light pollution is so bad from the beam of the security lights outside through her window. So everyone in Maple Ridge community that lives facing that center, it's like you're going to be under 24-hour bright lights. Mm-hmm. So that's going to affect your ability to sleep and to get your rest. And then that affects the rest of your life. So I think that it's important that we look out for those people who may not know or may not have the means to fight for themselves. So that's why I'm kind of speaking out against the data center being built.
Do you think that this is just another tactic to displace folks, right? Because when it comes down to that Maple Ridge apartment, I'm not too sure how long it's been, been up. But at the same time, I know that it has changed managers time and time again. I know that they try to do new facelifts on the apartments time and time again. It's a lot of crime that happens over there. But at the same time, things are shaping up as the city in general, or I should say Landover in general, is shaping, right? So do you think that this is just another way or ploy to displace those people in the Maple Ridge apartments? Because a lot of people who live in the Maple Ridge apartments are of Black and brown people, of a disparity, of a diaspora, I should say, because a lot of Hispanics live in that apartment complex as well.
Yes, I do think that it is going to impact them, because who's going to want to live there? It's not an inexpensive place to live either. And that's one of my major issues with the community resources that we have available, is that you're getting apartments like Maple Ridge, what's the other one? I think it's now called like Cherry Hill Estates on Sheriff Road. So they're not quality places to live. And then now you're going to decrease the quality even further. So that means that you really don't want people living there, or the people that you want to live there, you want them to be so impoverished that they just have no choice but to put up with it, Yeah. So it's unfortunate that that's the route that they want to go. I feel like everything is in, kind of like homeostasis and plays a part in the balance of the community. So the more that they decrease the quality of living, the more our residents will have a lower quality of life, and then in turn act out in that experience. People that have low qualities of life, they're going to commit more crime. They're going to do things because they have no choice, or they feel they have no choice. So if we as a community can't uplift Landover, then I feel like the data center shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you this last question on this particular topic, because I want to move on. I want to talk a little bit about the task force before I let you go. And then another thing that I thought about too, as I was thinking about the Maple Ridge Apartments and I was thinking about the senior citizens home, I was thinking that Kenmore Elementary School is right there. Like, if nothing blocks it but a bunch of trees, right? Like, if we used to knock the trees down, you could see directly to the elementary school. So how do you think this is going to affect our young kids at the same time? I don't even think that they thought about this as far as the board, just the overall distance of how many things are around them. You have senior citizens, you have elementary schools, and you have an entire complex that's already dealing with disparities at the same time.
Yes, they have not released what type of energy they're planning on using for the center. And I feel like that's going to be a key component in what we see as a result of how it impacts the children, how it impacts the seniors, and how it impacts the residents of those Maple Ridge and Glen Arden communities. Because if we're using nuclear energy to power that thing, it's going to definitely impact the people that live in close proximity. If we're using gas like they're doing in Memphis, it's going to impact us.
Yes.
So who's going to want to walk through clouds of smoke, breathing that in to go to school? And I think that it's unfair for us to not look at the whole picture and just say, well, the money, it's going to bring in so much revenue. Larry Hogan, and well, I guess during the period of Larry Hogan being governor, I'm not saying he specifically, but they have waived the 6% sales and use tax in the state of Maryland for data centers. So how much revenue are we really going to see? And why aren't they paying that 6% just like a small business would? I'm also a small business owner. When I pay my taxes, I have to pay my sales and use tax. So that's not fair that a big business is going to come in and then deduct from what they could be giving us more revenue by not paying that 6%. So I would like to see that policy changed as well. We shouldn't be incentivizing data centers to come into Maryland. And then just briefly, because your listeners are mostly in Pennsylvania, I was doing a little research and I'm like, Amazon investing $20 million or billion into the state. It was an infrastructure thing. It's not necessarily going to benefit the residents and impact them directly. And Maryland and Pennsylvania are on the same power grid. So I should be just as worried about the data centers in Pennsylvania.
We share the same watershed as well.
Exactly. So I should be just as concerned about what's going on in Pennsylvania, and you guys should be just as concerned about what's going on in Maryland, because we're all going to face those energy challenges. I think it's called PJM or something, is the energy company that determines the prices of BG&E down here and in Pennsylvania and other parts, like I think Delaware also. So it's like, if they're the big conglomerate telling us how much we have to pay for energy, they're creating the price. It's made up. There's no rule that says energy has to cost X, Y, and Z. So once the data center is open, now that energy cost goes up because they're parlaying or putting the cost off onto the residents. Mm-hmm. So residents all the way up and down, this corridor are going to be impacted once that data center is open, and their energy costs are going to go up.
I definitely agree with you on that. Taylor, I thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you for, just being an advocate and being in the, the light to shine on what's going on around you. But I want to ask you this last question before I let you go, because you brought up the task force. And I wanted to just, break that down a little bit about what a data center task force even looks like, right? Because it's like, is it like we're creating our own union around it so people can know that we want to make sure that people's input and impact are a part of it? Or is it just another political ploy so the people who are on the board or the advisory committee can have some type of say-so in what goes on? Like, what is the task force actually doing, or what is it for?
So as of right now, the task force is here to evaluate the necessity, the health risks, all of those kind of political things of whether or not it should come to the county, or where the county stands as far as the data centers are concerned. But I do feel it's more of like just kind of advisory board. They're primarily representatives of data centers on the board. There are a few community members on the board, but it's not made up of community members primarily. So I feel like the focus is on convincing the residents of why we need the data centers, as opposed to listening to what the residents have to say about why we don't want the data centers. But I'm hoping to change that. Again, the meeting's going to be on September 10th. If anyone's in the area, you can get more information on the Prince George's County's website. And I also have linked it onto the Instagram video.
And do you hear anything from the mayor? Like, do you hear anything from the mayor or like Glen Arden? Do you hear anything from the mayor of like Palmer Park? Like the small counties that are in between the huge makeup of what's going on with Landover? Like, do you see the thing they're reaching out?
Well, that's one of the challenges with Landover. Many of the areas are unincorporated. So Palmer Park does not actually have a mayor. Okay. It's not incorporated. So Glen Arden would be the closest kind of town or city in Landover that has a mayor of its own. So I haven't heard anything from them just yet, but I will be reaching out shortly because I do want to get their input. Palmer Park has a community association, which is one of the organizations that was represented when I spoke with Shayla Adams Stafford the other day. So I do want to get them involved and get other community organizations involved, because I think the more people know about it, the less likely we have a chance of this breaking ground.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you this last question, because you just lit a light bulb off in my head, right? So like Palmer Park doesn't have a mayor either, right?
Right.
So what are those considered?
I guess it would be a neighborhood or a development.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it's not a city.
It's
so the city
unincorporated area. Exactly.
So the city is Landover. Inside of Landover, you have these little pockets, and that's why they're so big, such as Kitland.
Exactly. Glen Arden, Palmer Park, Woodmore area is kind of a little bit in where the Woodmore Town Center just was built. Mm-hmm. So those are the little like smaller neighborhoods within the Landover.
Would Woodmore be able to voice their opinion, or they won't? They would have to have an association as well because they don't have an elected official.
No, I think that residents of Woodmore, like the Woodmore Town Center area, would still be considered Landover. So they wouldn't have like their own set. They do have county council members for specific one person that's in charge and like a board or something of that sort in Landover specifically. But Glen Arden does have an established mayor. They have a board and all of those things. Okay. So if you're in the Woodmore area and you want to speak out against it because it will be in your backyard as well, then you would just need to contact your local county council representative.
Perfect. You just broke it down for me. So I'm sure you cleared it up for some people who are listening as well. Again, Taylor, I appreciate all the work that you're doing. Thank you for making time for us this morning. I definitely want to stay connected as this thing unfolds and continues to, just show up in our neighborhood at the same time. I truly, truly appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for getting ahead of this.
You're listening to The Week on WURD. Stay connected on the go with the WURD Radio app. Search WURD Radio in your app store. Stream every show with increased clarity. Easily access WURD TV, EcoWord, and Livelihood. Remember, Black Media Matters. Get the WURD Radio app today. Available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Week on WURD. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at WURDradio.com and on the WURD Radio app.